A hug, an embrace, a smile, a handshake, a rub. Of all the senses, nothing is more powerful than human touch. When we can't see it, we feel. When we can't hear, we feel. Our ability to touch is what makes us who we are, and the benefits are tremendous. In today's digital age, however, we are interacting with one another less, and our devices more. We are battling a war on touch. The direction of human physical contact needs to be explored before we become completely out of touch.
I know, I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember the last time I went somewhere without my phone.
And people have Instagram pages for their dogs now, and it's like hundreds of followers, and I want to do that fun stuff and show people that I have that and be cool.
So we're really connected in really nice ways, which is cool, and the ways we communicate are simplified because of the technology.
So they're probably on Chromebooks or some sort of technology for at least an hour and a half every single day.
News stories today can be accessed from nearly every device. In the United States, touch is often presented negatively. These stories directly affect the way we interact with one another.
Blake just can't keep her hands off Ryan. Hand on his arm, hand on his chest, hand on his waist. The normally private couple was loud and proud with their PDA.
The blog post by the Girl Scouts of America suggests that encouraging your daughter to hug someone, say a relative, at the holidays could be sending the wrong message, and it might lead to problems later in her life.
This message comes during a time sexual harassment is at the forefront of conversation. Kemke says talking to your child about good and bad touch can help them understand how to say no.
A 4-year-old, a 5-year-old doesn't know what consent is, but if they're empowered to be able to say no, that is an early lesson that they'll have in learning that.
Hillary Duff posted a photo showing her kissing her 4-year-old son, Luca, on the mouth, and some people said it's, quote, confusing, and another quote here, unhealthy. She Instagrammed this picture at Disneyland on Monday. Lots of people liked the photograph, but enough people criticized her that she felt the need to respond.
Intimacy is really challenging for our generation, particularly because of porn and the way that we've really media has driven sex, and intimacy and love is not as publicized or basically devoured by our generation, whereas it was a much more a part of getting to know someone, and that whole integration period was prevalent with our parents, and now it's not quite there anymore. I think that it's still really hard for our generation to be intimate with someone in a non-sexual way, and in a not their mind isn't going to somewhere else. Speaking of technology, that their mind isn't going somewhere else, but to really again tune into that present moment awareness, that witness to someone's existence. And I think that's what we're losing track of. Is we can still talk to people, talk on the phone, connect with people. We want to do that. But really being there to see that person and not have our minds going to what am I doing after this? Where is my thing so that I can check what's going on still?
I think that it's important that students know how to use technology, because it is becoming such a big part of our world. And if you don't know how to use a computer, it's really hard to get any sort of job where you're going to make a decent income.
The apps are great. I mean, if you're communicating with someone whose language is Swahili or French or Arabic and you don't speak it, it's really convenient to pop into Google Translate and be able to get the words you need right away.
So if you give half the class Chromebooks and they plug in headphones, they're engaged for 30 minutes because kids, whether we like it or not, really enjoy technology.
At the same time, I mean, we're doing amazing things around the world in all directions. Everybody is chipping in, GoFundMes, online campaigns, our ease of travel, our quickness of awareness about issues that are going on in the world.
You kind of are drawn to the computer more than you are like social interaction, just because it's easier. It's easier to just stare at a computer screen that can't like give you challenging things to say back and forth like you can with a person. You can't really get asked difficult questions, like complex questions from a computer, like a person can.
With the social media not being alone thing, I still feel like if I was locked in a room and I had my phone for the rest of my life, I would still feel alone. Even if I could talk to like whoever I wanted on the phone and Facebook and all that stuff, I would still feel like ultimately very alone. And I think that that's like a misconception that we have about media, is that it's like, I can connect to all these people and like I can do a group chat and like blah, blah, blah. But in our bodies, we aren't feeling that connection. It can feel brief, like, you talk on the phone, it's like, okay, I connected with my parents, but it's not as intimate as being with someone. Yeah, I think that there's something about like being the witness to someone's life is really important, and social media isn't really being a witness to someone's life, it's being a witness to the life they want you to see.
From the time of birth, physical touch is essential, natural, and necessary for human growth and development.
Like the rise of technology and how everything's so digital these days, would you say that's taking away from the skin-to-skin contact?
It really terrifies me because I see so much of parents interacting with their cell phones in some portion of that time used to would be interacting with the baby.
In the emergency department, I tend not to do a lot of hands-on stuff unless it's a small child. And then it's a little different. But when you're a kid, it can be really helpful to have someone, again, hold you. We do have children that if they had parents that were inappropriately fitted to them, basically like didn't take care of them as infants, didn't hold them, didn't listen to them, wasn't reciprocal to them crying and stuff, it can cause a lot of mental problems later on in life.
My name is Nell Ishii. I used to work here for 20 years, a little more than that. I'm now retired, but I continue to teach baby massage here. If you all went out today and you had all your physiologic heart rate, breathing, all those kind of things that tell how you're feeling, if you had all those measured and then had a massage, at the end of the massage, those things would show a more positive, more relaxed way of being. What's different with babies is yours bumps up to here, theirs bumps up to there. It's really the way that we are made as humans, as mammals, is to have a very high need for touch. So I think we don't begin to understand all the ways that touch is of critical importance, but we do know that babies who don't get much of it don't grow very well, they're less healthy, more stressed out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
My name is Janelle Michelson. I'm a certified nurse midwife, and I went to school a long time ago and loved being with women in labor and birth. But after the mom has delivered the baby, given birth, we put the baby skin to skin without any clothes on, and it's really important. It's called kangaroo care. And we teach this to the fathers as well, because so many times the fathers feel left out. After, the mother's been carrying the baby all this time for 40 weeks, and then she gets all these wonderful personal touches of being with the baby, feeling the baby kick and move inside of her. And then afterwards, she's the primary feeder, and so she is feeding the baby. So it's really a wonderful thing to teach the fathers then that they can take showers with their baby, they can be close naked, have their top off and have the baby be naked next to them. The oxytocin is the love drug. I don't know if you know that hormone. And of course, after the baby's born, that's the mother is really attached to the baby through that hormone. And also, they're so adorable anyway.
Babies were not allowed to leave the hospital until they weighed 5 pounds. And so there were what was called grower nurseries. A paradigm was that half of the babies would be rocked, the other babies would have baby massage. And the babies who received the massage gained 50% more weight per day on the same caloric intake, which was a really interesting finding. It meant they could leave the hospital a couple of days sooner.
There are some instances that the baby is too sick to be able to have skin on the mom or the dad, but then we make sure that there's skin to skin with holding the baby's hands, the tiny hands, or the belly or whatever, the legs, so that so the baby feels touched.
Not too fun. We got to make a sandcastle.
So ELL is just English language learners. So it's anybody who English comes as a second language to them. So if you come to this country from anywhere where you speak a different language, you're considered an ELL student for at least a year until they deem you fluent enough in English to move into the regular curriculum. Hands-on learning with the ELL students is super important because a lot of times if you just tell them to do something, they don't understand it. And sometimes it's not even a problem of the language barrier, it can be a cultural barrier also. Physical models we try to incorporate with those students as often as possible. In our math unit, we do math every day for an hour, and we had 24 Chromebooks in the classroom that half the class would spend 30 minutes on while the other class did a mini lesson on the board, and then after that we would switch. So students were exposed to technology for a minimum of half an hour a day. I know that right now there's a unit going on where students are typing instead of writing by hand, and that takes up another hour of the day. A lot of times when you're in a diverse classroom, behavior is a big issue, and kind of keeping kids quiet and keeping kids under control while learning can be difficult. So if you give 12 of the 24 kids in your classroom Chromebooks and they just put their headphones in for 30 minutes, you can focus on 12 kids for half an hour and kind of give them more one-on-one instruction. And I think that it's important that students know how to use technology because it is becoming such a big part of our world. And if you don't know how to use a computer, it's really hard to get any sort of job where you're going to make a decent income. You're giving 12-year-old students access to the internet, and that can be troublesome sometimes because unless you have every single site blocked, students can go on anything while you're teaching this other portion of the class, and they can really search anything they want. I teach one of the students from Somali how to multiply, and he had absolutely no idea what it meant. The X and the plus are just like that, so like he just thought that it was adding. So we used a physical model and grouping to like show him how to multiply, and after like half an hour on the computer, he had no idea how to do it, and then we sat down for 5 minutes one-on-one, and over 5 minutes he learns how to multiply. The physical models really come in handy, and I think it is more beneficial than a computer. But the problem is you can't have a one-on-one for every single student.
Not be able to learn self-regulation. They constantly have to have some stimulation or entertainment. I feel that could play into attention issues down the road.
You know, if you're on the line and you don't want to do something anymore, you can just change it like that. And you can just be constantly, in 5 minutes you can be on 5 different websites. I think we've seen a major increase in the amount of ADD cases in schools and ADHD, and I think that can stem directly from technology.
Not only is technology in classrooms increasing attention deficit disorders, but it is also causing problems in understanding other cultures.
I I travel a lot. I started traveling when I was 18. I went on a study abroad in Guatemala, and then I majored in Spanish, and then I studied in Mexico, and then I just kept traveling either for climbing or surfing or biking. And then because now I'm a teacher educator and I prepare teachers to work with English language learners with immigrant or refugee backgrounds, it's just so important for me that their intercultural competence is really high. And I'm also really concerned just about cultivating empathy in the world in general, and I'm seeing so much breakdown in our society because we just don't understand each other. So whether cultural differences are between two Americans who see things differently, or someone from Morocco and someone from China seeing things differently because of culture, I think it helps when we kind of get a sense of where we're all coming from. So first of all, it's interesting to note that culture is the most difficult language, or difficult word in the English language to define. There are hundreds and hundreds of definitions of culture. So when you think about crossing cultures, there's just so much involved. And sometimes when we talk about culture, we use the iceberg model. And what you see on the surface, just the tip of the iceberg, is like the clothing and the food and the dance and all those things. But beneath the surface is all of the values and beliefs and worldviews and all the more really complex stuff that sometimes we're even blind to. There is haptics, which is related to touch. There's proxemics, which is related to closeness, space between people. And then kinesics, which is gestures and facial expressions and all of those things. And they convey so much meaning. You know, direct eye contact, for example, for Americans in our society is a sign of confidence, attentiveness, paying attention, engagement. But eye contact in some cultures, especially when age and gender come into play, can get you in a lot of trouble, can signify that you don't respect the power balance that might be there. So when you take those things away and you're just communicating through text, you might lose elements of power or respect or hierarchy in the social class that's important in a given culture. When I'm teaching now to my refugee background adults, if we have a funny moment, one of my students will just slap me on the hand, and now she's holding my hand, and she'll just continue holding my hand while we keep on going on with class. And she's from Somalia, and it's just a more hands-on, touchy, intimate space is more precious between friends. And touch builds trust with people, and it builds compassion, and it builds confidence. And so I think when you take away touch, or you take away eye contact, you take away physical space from communication, I think you lose some of that compassion and that trust and those connections that are really important for us to care what the other person is even saying in the first place, to believe them, to want to hear more, to want to know that not only is this person sending me words about something, but they're a human with a heart and children and a family and a complicated past. And so yeah, I think, I just think that the physical connection is so important to building all of that. Mm-hmm. Because I've traveled so much and I just picture all the places in the world I've been, and like in Tanzania you get on this little bus called the Dala Dala, and it's really tiny and everyone packs in and everyone's skin is touching and you can smell everything and feel everything. And if a mama has a baby on her back and she can't get in, someone will just take the baby off her back and pass it back, and someone will take it, and that's just how the culture works. It's just hands-on and hands in, and it's just so lovely, and so in my classes when the women do grab my hand or hold my hand while we're teaching and talking, it's just tender and it's special, and I wish we had more of that.
The war on touch is more prevalent now than ever before. Our perceptions of touch affect the way we learn and interact, but most importantly, our mental health is at stake when we are deprived of touch. Touch reduces stress levels. Touch makes us feel loved and cared for. Subconsciously or consciously, our culture has found ways to cope with touch deprivation.
I would say that even though it seems as though we're getting more and more technologically involved, there is like this pushback culture that is very like homegrown and like wanting to be touchy-feely, and like that's part of the reason why yoga has like exploded in the US and like in the West, is like it does tune into these things that we want to be feeling, but our like social media is exactly the opposite, and so we're wrapped up in that, but we know what we really want, and there's kind of been this inverse of reconnecting. Within yoga, What I tend to think about is that sometimes people are coming into my class and they may have not been held all day. They may have not been held all week. And by held, I mean touched in a really compassionate way, not sexual, not like really intimate, although it can be intimate, but in this just deep, like feeling held way. And so whenever I go into a class and I anticipate putting my hands on someone, it's always going to be with the intention that I want them to feel like they're being held, or that they're being helped in a way that makes them feel good about themselves and comfortable.
Well, I'm very much like an expressive person with my hands. When I meet someone, I always shake their hand. I think a handshake is a really big deal, as most people know about me. So I sort of try to get a feel when I meet a patient, like how they're responding to, you know, being in my personal space, or me being in their personal space, I should say. And then I just kind of gauge it that way. If I think that like they want that, there's that sort of like warm physical, not banter, but kind of like open contact. If I think someone's not into it all, you know, then I back off. I shake their hand. I try to keep it very like professional, sort of black and white in that sense, as far as like how much I'm going to be touching them. If, you know, we start to gain a good rapport with each other, then, you know, like I'll touch someone's arm, or, you know, it just sort of depends. If I'm doing acupuncture with them, then, you know, again, I sort of walk them through it before I do it. Like, how do you feel about me, you know, palpating your arm or your foot? Most of the time, if someone's coming there, they know they're gonna get touched, unless it was someone who said off the bat, like, I know this is what you do, but I just don't like it. Is there anything else you can do for me? For the most part, people want to be touched when they're coming to you. Luckily, I haven't burned anyone or anything yet. That surprisingly is the #1 side effect of what we do, even though people mostly associate like needling with acupuncture. I mean, obviously that's the biggest thing that we do, but we use this burning herb called moxibustion, which is supposed to be very healing in a lot of different ways. You turn your head for a second, that can fall on someone, burn their skin a little bit. If it's not your friend or family member, they're probably not too jazzed to come back and see you. I think I would be very wary of anyone, colleague or not, or anyone I saw in, like, being the patient in a medical profession, if they didn't shake my hand. I think I'd be very wary if they didn't shake my hand, because I wouldn't want the first time someone touching me was when they were inserting a needle, or when they were examining me somewhere on my body, if it were, you know, primary care doctor. So I think handshake is, me personally, I think that is always necessary, no matter what. I think it'd be weird if someone didn't touch you in that context.
An owner projects unresolved feelings acquired from childhood onto their dog so that their pet becomes a surrogate child, parent, sibling, or loved one. Kat says that because of this attachment, the dog is being asked to compensate for an unrequited emotional need in its owner, and this places an undue emotional burden on the dog. Since dogs, social by instinct, aren't equipped to cope with the kinds of emotional demands specific to human beings. Vermont has the highest per capita of dog ownership in the country, most of them being rescues, and so I think especially here in Vermont, like you walk down the street and it's like you see at least 10 dogs just walking down one street. I think that using dogs for therapy, whether it's like physical or mental disabilities, is unbelievable, and I think it's one of the most, like, to see that connection between a person and a dog is one of the most amazing things. Like, there's a dog that we have at daycare named Toulouse, and she's technically a service dog, even though she's not really like trained in it. She's really, like, because her owner is in a wheelchair. So basically she's like an emotional therapy dog, in the sense that when her owner is stressed out or anything, like, Toulouse can sense that and will just like come by her side and like just sit there and like be a companion that she can pet, and you wouldn't know it because in pack she's crazy. Toulouse is like, but like the second you're like Toulouse, like reset, she's unbelievable. I'm reading a book right now, it's actually right there, Your Dog is Your Mirror, and it's by this guy, Kevin Behan, who's like trademarked natural dog training, and he talks about how a lot of times we humanize dogs and like we try to look at them in a way that makes more sense to us by like personifying them and like the effects that it can have on a dog. And he basically just says that dogs can feel when we're sad. Dogs are not humans, and like we try to make them that. And then when they're living in this world with us, it's like a lot of times dogs have issues because we put these responsibilities on them of things that we need in people, and they can't understand that, and they can't like project that back. So as a result, they act out in ways that are like normal to them. So like people coming to the door, and like if it's men, if you're like afraid of men, they'll, you know what I mean? Like your dog will have issues with men. It's really like opening, like Kevin Behan just talks about how the personification of dogs really like hinders your relationship with them, and like you need to understand them in a different way, where it's like they're just like a conduction pipe of energy, and like if it's not released in a good manner, like they'll act out in all different ways. So in that, I think that's one of the coolest things about owning a dog, is it really gets you, if you look at it the right way and like constantly force yourself to think about it, it like gets you in touch with yourself in ways that you wouldn't be able to. Like they really like open that up for you and just like make it an opportunity to really self-reflect and see like inner issues or things that are going on with you that you wouldn't have without them.
I think that the amount of contact, both skin to skin, but also looking at each other, has taken a nosedive. Safe touch is so important, but I am really worried that we are inhibiting children's natural impulse to help their friend who has fallen down. It's just another piece that I worry about, of us throwing roadblocks in the way of natural compassion.
But a lot of communication, like a very large percentage, I won't put a number on it, but a lot of our communication is nonverbal. And so there's so much to how close you stand, your eye contact, the smell you give off, the touch you give to somebody that's involved in sending a message. And different cultures have different ways of using those nonverbal cues to communicate. So when you strip all that away and we're only communicating through devices and through social media, we lose so much of the richness of our language and our communication abilities. I think that what's going to happen is your generation, who's becoming more aware of maybe this loneliness epidemic that's coming through reliance on digital technology, you're probably going to have a pendulum swing where you guys come back around, and maybe, for example, devices won't be allowed in schools as much as they are now, and I hope in even restaurants and in public spaces there will be less reliance on it, because it's even just sad to be on a subway or on a bus and nobody's looking up, or here on campus and everyone's walking between Alio and St. Ed's looking down, texting, nobody's looking up anymore. And it kind of breaks my heart a little bit, you know, because you used to just see people waving and talking and connecting. There's definitely pros and cons, but I do hope that your generation kind of pulls back the reins a little bit so that we don't all just become walking, you know, stroking our blue screens, you know, just seeing what else is going on in the world and not realizing it's right here. The world is right here. And there's, you know, there's nothing more sort of wonderful for me than the days I leave my phone at home by accident. Then I'm not constantly checking the email and checking the Facebook and, you know, just random checking, like addictive checking. And I think it's really problematic, and I can only imagine what it's doing to the young people today who are growing up on screens constantly. So I want to see us be more connected, because I think empathy in the world is so necessary, and it's so important, and we're in trouble if we don't cultivate it.
Physical contact is what truly distinguishes humans from other animals. We have developed complex languages, cultures, and emotional expression through physical contact. But in a tech-saturated world, human touch is in danger of becoming rare, if not obsolete. We need touch for empathy, growth, and love. It is fundamental to everything we think and feel, and how we communicate and bond. We need human touch to be human, and it is vital to preserve human touch in order for us to truly thrive.
when you came to me with your bad dreams and your fears. It was easy to see you've been crying. Seems like everywhere you turn, catastrophe reigns. But who really bothers from the dying? I could hold you in my arms. I could hold you forever. And I could hold you in my arms.